Hello, I'm Jake, and I'm going to be telling you about drop frame rates and non-drop frame rates. And we have to start at the beginning. In early film, 35 millimeter was the standard for filming and editing. And the standard was also 24 frames per second for editing and for showing in theaters. And so this all worked great. It was primarily black and white. And then the home TV set was introduced, where this is where we started using things like interlacing, where we play half the frame and then the other half of the frame to match up for a smoother picture. And when home TVs are introduced, we started a new standard of frame rates. And so for North American countries, there was something called NTSC. And what this did was it standardized the frame rate at 30 frames per second instead of 24. And the reason for this is because all North American electrical systems run at 60 hertz or 60 cycles per second. And this made it easy to play something on an interval of that. And so basically for all of North America, we were playing these at 30 frames per second. And for Europe and Asia, it was played at 25 frames per second because their electrical grid runs at 50 hertz instead of 60 hertz. And that also worked pretty well with black and white TV. And only when color TV was introduced did we start to have some difficulties. Obviously, with color TV, we need to send more information along with the video than we do with black and white TV. Things like color, luminance, everything like that. And that information that we were sending with the signal was actually interfering with the audio signal. There would be periodic beeping frequencies, or beating, I should say, frequencies that were very audible on home TV sets. And the solution that very smart engineers came up with was that if we slow the frame rate just a little bit, then that no longer occurs because the frequencies are slightly different. And so when the standard was 24 frames per second, we would change color video to be 24 frames per 1.001 second, which is where we get the term 29 point, one second, I have to look at my number for this, 29.976 frames per second. And so basically, we're taking the same frames and just playing them really, really slightly slower, and this got rid of our beating frequency issue, but obviously, there's a whole other bag to unpack there. And so, while we're portraying them like that, we have to have other ways to represent and view these, in real time, right? So the way that things are represented in DAWs and other nonlinear editing systems is that we drop the first 2 frames for the first 9 minutes. And so that means when we're looking at our frames, it's going to be like frames 0 and frames 1 are dropped, and then our frame begins at 02. And this happens for everything but the 10th frame. And now these aren't frames that are just magically disappearing into thin air. This is for our mind to wrap around the fact that we are displaying in real time something that is ever so slightly slower than real time. And once we make this adjustment, and that's also being said every 10th minute, we don't make that adjustment. And this puts us on, the equivalent of what would be 24 frames for every 1.001 second. And it is important to note that often things like cameras or digital systems might say they are running at 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second, but actually using a drop frame sequence and just saying that original for simplicity. So it is very important to know whether your said camera or system is actually using a drop frame system or a real frame system, because things like TV providers and other big systems require an exact length. And if you are using drop frame, then your exact length is going to be different for exactly 24 frames per second or drop frame. And anyway, that was my explanation. I hope you like it. Comment below, subscribe.